So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We're excited to have everybody here as we get closer and closer to our signature turn-in date. It's all very exciting. We have a very special guest. We're excited to welcome Dave Daley to our conversation today, and Catherine is going to be talking with him. Of course, we're going to give you an update about where we're at and what's happening with Signature Collection and everything. Elizabeth and Colin are going to talk about the District of Strangers strange special election that we had yesterday in Congressional District 6. And then we're going to talk a little bit about next steps and how you can get involved. So really, without any further ado, I'm going to turn over to Catherine Terser, who's going to introduce our guest. Oh, no, wait. Before then, I am just going to show a few slides of what has been going on in the past month. Every month when we have a huddle, we just share a few slides of all these amazing people out there doing their thing, collecting signatures, spreading the word about the Citizens Not Politicians Amendment. And it is just so impressive. And this is just a tiny taste. Look at Trevor and Heather, so nice. A tiny taste of all the wonderful work and effort and man hours and woman hours in particular that have gone into signature collection. So we always thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And we also appreciate you sharing your lovely photographs with us. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Catherine. And maybe Catherine, would you like me to just take the slides down and just share a spotlight on you too?
Sounds like a plan.
All right.
So I love this picture of Dave. It was from a conference in North Carolina about 5 years ago. I think the thing that's super exciting about Dave is he has come to Ohio a number of different times. And so I was really pleased that he joined us today. Now, I always clutch my pearls a little bit when I say the name of Dave's first book, which was Rat Effed, Why Your Vote Doesn't Count. And then the next was Unrigged, How Americans Are Battling to Save Democracy. In both cases, Ohio was part of the story. And many of you will remember, Cleveland friends, you'll remember Dave took a trip to talk about Rat Effed in 2016 at the Unitarian Universalist church up there. And he came to hang out with us on Election Day, May 2018. And so we're just really pleased that he's here. I also wanted to highlight that Dave is the senior fellow at Fair Vote. And with that, Dave, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you to all of you amazing volunteers and warriors for democracy. The work you all do is inspiring and so important, not just for Ohio, but for the entire country. So really the pleasure of being here is entirely mine. I have been a journalist all of my life, really. And I was editor-in-chief of Salon and in the early 2010s. And we covered, an awful lot of politics. And I edited an amazing politics team that at the time included, a young Steve Kornacki and Joan Walsh and all kinds of people who were incredibly smart and brilliant and went on to great things. And what we were covering from Washington just became madness. It felt to me like every day what was happening in the House. And really, Sandy Hook was the telltale thing for me. I mean, I wasn't naive about how difficult it would be to make gun control work in this country. But, I really thought that the massacre of kindergartners and first graders might get us somewhere. And when even that didn't happen, I asked a really simple question. It was just, why when in 2012, when Americans reelected Barack Obama and gave the Democrats, extra seats in the Senate, I was just curious as to why the House didn't flip. And what I stumbled across was Red Map. What I stumbled across was sort of the diabolical but genius scheme to take control of state legislatures in the 2010 election, flip them so that one side controlled every seat at the table in the redistricting that followed. And once, I think all of you probably have had the same experience. Once you begin to see American politics or state politics through the lens and the frame of redistricting, you can't unlook, because you begin to realize that it is the crucial thing. And that one question led me to writing the book that I can't tell my mom about, and about and what has been almost 10 years now of sort of writing about democracy and voting rights, and what I think are just the most important battles for the future of the country, and the future of our states, that all of you are so bravely and passionately involved in.
So one of the things that I was super interested in had to do with the intersection of dark money and redistricting that was part of the Rat F
Mm-hmm.
story. But before I ask you to tell us a little bit about that, I wanted to highlight that Ohio's state house, we've had, a long time where Republicans have been in power, in charge. But in 2010, we had a Democratic House and we had a Republican Senate. And so as we think about the transition from having a Democratic House to a Republican House, we're part of that story. So tell us a little bit about kind of the intersection of dark money and redistricting.
Yeah, no, I think in some ways, well, the story that I tell in the book really begins on the night that Barack Obama was elected in 2008, because it was a really fascinating coalition that came together, and you had folks on the right and on the left, who thought that this was going to be the defining coalition in American politics for a generation. The smartest, if you go back and watch television from that night, which I had to do, you see folks, talking about this, Newt Gingrich and all kinds of people thinking Republicans could be a minority party in the country for a generation. And it didn't work out that way. And I would argue it didn't work out that way in part because you had some really savvy strategists who understood that as historic as the 2008 election was, that the 2010 election could be more consequential because it was a redistricting year, that whoever controlled state legislatures after 2010 was going to be in the catbird seat when it came to drawing the lines that would define our politics for the next decade in state legislatures and in Congress. And so the intersection of dark money here is kind of fascinating, because in January of 2010 is when the Citizens United decision comes down, which really liberates all kinds of dark money into the system, and made it a lot easier for the folks who funded Red Map and this plan to sort of take control of state legislatures to have a bigger seat at the table in redistricting. But they got away with this for really what is chump change. The entire operation was $30 million, which is nothing in American politics, right? I mean, it was a bargain. They were playing Moneyball. So there is absolutely this combination of dark money that made it possible. And you can trace sort of all of these dominoes, right? From January 2010, Citizens United comes down, and then this money begins to flow into the system that becomes really difficult to track. But it was a couple $1 million in every state that managed to do this, because state legislative seats back then were sort of the biggest bargain in American politics, and people could come into those districts as they did in September and October of 2010 and come in with $100,000 of ad buys in a suburban Ohio district back then. The incumbent never saw it coming. And folks were able to take an awful lot of those state legislatures and, you know, a lot of states like Ohio, I don't think proportional fairness when it comes to partisanship has existed really since that night. And when you look at, and we can talk about this too, but I mean, when you look at what happens when you create so many uncompetitive districts on both sides, the election that matters most becomes the partisan primary. And so you begin to see much more extreme people winning these sort of summer low turnout partisan primaries in which the only people who turn out to vote are the hardcore base. You might have 7 or 8 people running in one of those races. Someone can walk away with a seat in the Ohio, state Senate for probably, I'm sure folks have done it with as little as 27, 28% in some of these races. So it becomes a minority of a minority with super majority power.
So you brought an interesting point. We were one of the states that was covered, but we also had Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's been like for them since
Yeah, I mean, it's been
2010?
It's been a long fight in all of those states, right? I mean, Michigan, they had the constitutional amendment process there. The same time you all were working on it in 2018, and they did manage to win the constitutional amendment there. And they had a citizen panel draw those maps in 2021. This lawsuit that has, I think, jeopardized in many ways the partisan fairness of especially the Senate map right now. Wisconsin, it has been a 14-year fight to win fairness. I mean, I think what you guys have experienced is really similar to what's happened in Ohio, in Wisconsin. Those lines held. You have this intensely 50-50 purple state, maybe a little more purple that in Ohio is, but it's certainly not a supermajority Republican state, which is what it's become. And they've had to sort of, without the initiative process that you all have, they've had to do this by clawing back seats on the state's Supreme Court one at a time. In North Carolina, they thought that they had won partisan fairness and an end to partisan gerrymandering through a state Supreme Court ruling. And then the state Supreme Court was flipped on its head. And that case came back and it went the other way. So I think the lesson here is that you are not the only ones in this really, really long fight. Lots of states that had this happen to them are in the same battle as you are. Some of them have had victories along the way. Some of them have had defeats, but the important thing is they've all had to keep fighting. They've had to hang in there in a really determined and dogged way.
Dave, can you tell us a little bit about like states that have
and no victory is ever the end of what?
There for a minute I kind of lost you, and you'll notice I have a cold, everybody. Sorry about that.
No,
One of the things I am interested in is if you could tell us a little bit about states where they have independent commissions.
Yeah, I mean, the states with independent commissions always come out with fairer maps. You can see it. You can see what happened in Michigan, right? I mean, Michigan was a state that had been gerrymandered for decades. The party that won the most votes could never translate those votes into a majority. You had one party that won a majority of votes in every state house election for a decade in Michigan and never controlled a majority. And the maps that they drew in 2021, that won't be the case. If Democrats win more votes, they will be in charge. If Republicans win more votes, they will be in charge. The will of the people will be heard. And that really has been the case in California. Um, the states that have passed independent initiatives that have taken the politicians out of the process of drawing their own districts and choosing their own voters, they see much more proportional, fair results. And a majority of voters can change their government again. And that's what elections ought to be about.
When you've looked at these other states, we're in this big fight this year with the Citizens Not Politicians campaign. Are there things that you see that should give us hope, things that will get us to think about, well, how can we make our way to the finish line?
You know, I think what's important to understand here is none of this is easy, that none of these fights are ever over, that the forces that are lined up against you are equally determined. But that when people stand up together, the story in Michigan, the story of the story of the ballot initiatives in Florida, in Missouri, in Utah, it's that people come together and they fight and they win. I mean, the history of voting rights in this country is not a straight line of progress, right? It's one of expansion and retraction. And the fight that we're in now, I mean, in many ways, it's just the latest chapter in a struggle that is as old as the nation itself. And if citizens want to prevail in this battle, we have to keep working even harder still. Don't stop now. Adversaries are not discouraged. They're simply testing your commitment to the combat that is ahead. Keeping a democracy requires a lot of work. But I think what the stories from around the country show is that when regular citizens come together and stand and fight for the kind of democracy they want, when all of us put our hands on what Dr. King called, right, the moral arc of the universe, and pull down hard in the right direction, that there isn't a structural barrier that we can't fit together. This is our work. This is the everyday work of citizens, understanding that democracy is an action, a verb, something that we have to tend together, something within ourselves that we have to work to perfect every day. You all are doing amazing work of democracy, and you've just got a little bit more to go until you push yourself over that finish line. We are with you. We are rooting for you. We appreciate your hard work. Keep going. Thank you.
I'm going to jump in to save poor Catherine, who's coughing away there. And what you just said, you are speaking to the right crowd. These people on this call are the ones that are getting up every day and fighting for democracy, and they mean it, and they're doing it, every day. And that's so inspiring. Can you share some examples from your experience around the country in Ohio or elsewhere of democracy warriors, and what you think makes them effective, just regular citizens kind of fighting for democracy?
Sure. I mean, I think all of you in Ohio probably know the story of Katie Fahey in Michigan and what she managed to build with Voters Not Politicians there. One of my favorite stories comes from Idaho, where I went out and rode the Medicaid Express with a bunch of young activists who didn't understand why their state didn't take the Medicaid expansion money in a state that has so many rural hospitals and just needs that money so badly. And in 2018, the same time that all of you were working on your redistricting amendment, they were driving around Ohio in this green RV collecting signatures in every part of the state. Idaho is a big, big state. It's a red state. But this was a nonpartisan movement trying to win a common sense fight. And they went out and they collected all of the signatures that they needed in 28 different counties in that massive state. They did all of the work. And they ended up winning Medicaid expansion in Idaho with 62% of the vote, which is incredible, right? We think of Idaho as just being a place where, change couldn't possibly be won. And they could do it there just because they were determined and they set out and they worked hard and they won. And no win is ever uncontested or easy, right? I mean, did they try to fight them in the courts? Of course. Did they then go into the legislature and say, we're going to make it a whole lot harder to get on the ballot? They did. And you know what their response is? They've not only kept going, they continue to use this process, and now they're working on open primaries and ranked choice voting in Idaho to really change the entire system. And that might win in November. People are hungry for this, you know, red, blue, purple. I think the sense that government is not working for all of us is something that ties us together. The sense that our politicians aren't responsive to us because they've drawn lines that entrench themselves in office and make themselves unbeatable, and then they only have to listen to themselves and the 22% that put them there. And what we see across the country is that we can and win.
Well, we last year, we had this big fight to protect direct democracy. Essentially, the state legislature, supermajority of the state legislature, attempted to make it harder for us to do citizen initiatives, essentially saying we had to get 5% of the gubernatorial vote in all 88 counties. So making grassroots organizing harder, like significantly harder, and making it so the threshold would be 60% rather than the traditional majority. And so these are the folks on this call. There are 128 of us now, for folks who are wondering about that. The folks on this call and folks all over Ohio really spend a lot of time protecting direct democracy. And so one of the things that I wondered about was, do you see a difference in the states that are able to use a citizens initiative or have a referendum?
Yes, I think that's the difference between Ohio and Wisconsin and Michigan and North Carolina, right? The states that have the initiative process are able to fight back. The states that don't have it are in a lot of trouble. And it's a million times harder, and you've got to do a state Supreme Court strategy, and that has become incredibly expensive, and it's partisan, and it's extraordinarily difficult. So when states have got the initiative process, you can organize and win. Of course, as you organize and win via the initiative process, the story in just about every state that still has it is that these states have fought very hard to make it much more difficult. It is wild to think that in many ways we are in a struggle with our own elected representatives about a democracy. But we are. And it's because our elected representatives do not really want to be elected by all of us. And those of us who want to continue to have a government by and for the people, representatives that govern with the authority given to them by us, renewed by us every 2 years, we've got to keep going because this is the struggle of our time. Every time has had one of these struggles. This one is ours. And it's not necessarily any harder than the ones that folks have had to face in other times. It is frustrating, but we can win. We have to stay strong and committed, and very aware that this is a long fight that needs us to roll up our sleeves every day.
Well, we have friends with it's Rank the Vote Ohio. So we have friends that
Hello,
care a
friends.
lot about ranked choice voting. And so I just wanted you to tell us a little bit about that and how you see that fight progressing across the country, since you're doing some good work with Fair Vote.
Sure. I think ranked choice voting has really become one of the most powerful and popular nonpartisan political reforms in the country. We've seen it in Maine and Alaska statewide. across red states like Utah and cities and towns, and New York City and Minneapolis and San Francisco for councils. And what you see really is that when you use RCV, essentially it is all about trying to find majority winners. We see it right.
Hopefully he'll come back on in a sec.
Have I fallen off? Am I back?
Yeah,
Yes,
we
you're back.
lost you
I'm
for
back.
about a minute.
Ah! Well, I guess what I would say is this: the beauty of ranked choice voting is that it puts an end to spoilers, and it generates real majority winners. And I think it's especially useful in primaries, where, especially in uncompetitive districts, where you've got, here in Massachusetts, sometimes as many as 12, 15 candidates, and someone can win with 15% of the vote. When you win a primary with 15% of the vote, that is not the same thing as, and then you coast into the fall into a safe seat. That is not the same thing as being elected by everybody. And then when you govern, you are only interested in that base, interested in everybody. So the beauty of RCV is it forces politicians to listen to everybody again. And when you have a race like you have right now for the presidency, and you have states that have been decided by 10, 11, 20,000 votes, and you have third-party candidates on it, we see right now that both parties are working hard to knock candidates off or challenge their signatures or say they don't live where they live, or to boost the all of this chicanery, and one might call it rat bleeping. RCV puts an end to it. It allows people to vote for who they want to vote for without having to do the complicated math of thinking that they are going to help the person that they want least. It's a really great fix, and where it's on the ballot, it's won 27 straight times now.
Well, thank you. Now, Michael Barron, who was the guy who helped organize,
Yes.
right, yes, he helped organize the event in October 16. He had a question. He said the Supreme Court of the United States seems to want states to control map making, so that's Rucho v. Common Cause. Is that still true, or will they try to take back authority when things don't go their way?
That is a good question. Um, I I think that what the Supreme Court said in Rucho, well, I think it was a deeply unfortunate and disingenuous decision in lots of ways. And my son is coming up to the plate here, so let me just keep one eye up there as I talk about Rucho. But the what I think was so painful about closing the federal courts to a decision on this, is that it threw it back to a bunch of individual states where the courts can be so deeply partisan. And so what we've seen is that the Supreme Courts in some states might jump in, but in other states, it's just not even possible. And courts have been partisan, and they've protected the maps that their own side has drawn. And certainly I think you saw that to some extent in Ohio. You had a very courageous Supreme Court justice, your Chief Justice, who I know now is deeply involved in this fight. And what a hero. And it's I think things have probably changed on that court. And what I wish is that every state people had the right to fair maps. It shouldn't just be in certain states where the court is constituted a certain way. And what I worry is that Rucho really not only made our fights for state Supreme Courts become all the more partisan, but that it took states like Texas and Georgia and Florida, and just made it really, really difficult to see a path forward in a lot of places. This is a national problem, and it calls for a national solution. And we really needed the U.S. Supreme Court there to step up on behalf of voters, and it didn't do it.
So I understand you have a new book. When is it coming out, and what is it about?
It's about the Supreme Court. And there's a whole chapter on Rucho. The book is called Anti-Democratic. It's out on August 6th, anywhere you find your books. And I'm trying to tell the story of really the 5 or 6 decade struggle to capture the courts. It is it's a story of how we got the Supreme Court that we now have, how we got the state courts that we now have, and what these decisions on voting rights have meant, what the consequences have been. And I would argue, in Ohio and Wisconsin and in North Carolina, you all have really borne the brunt of some of these big national decisions, and that the courts made it a lot harder to unwind. So I'm trying to tell a story of the courts, of John Roberts. I think sometimes Roberts is allowed to have a pass as the guy who is an umpire simply calling balls and strikes. And really what I would argue is that whether you're talking about Citizens United or whether you're talking about Shelby County, or Rucho, that Roberts has really been a wrecking crew on voting rights, and that he's been just especially virulently anti-voter in those cases and in a handful of other ones. So I'm trying to put it all together. A lot of things I think people may know about, but I'm trying to stitch it together into a coherent story of sort of how we went from here to there and why we are where we are now.
Now, are there reforms? Like we've talked about, of course, redistricting reform. We've talked about ranked choice voting. Are there reforms in the courts that you envision or you're thinking about?
I think there's a lot of things that we could do to fix the courts. I think we could fix it so that the courts have an ethics standard, so that the justices can't accept millions of dollars of gifts, right? I mean, a member of Congress can't take more than $50, but it appears that Supreme Court justices can take houses and vacations and all kinds of things that add up to millions of dollars sometimes. I mean, I think some kind of term limits would be a very valuable thing to think about. Some system in which the justices serve 18 years, and we know that every president is going to get 2, and they're cycled in and out. I think that you could expand the number of justices on the court to a broader number. The idea that any 9 people in a democracy have this kind of power, I think ought to concern us very much, that we have turned individuals into robed gods for a lifetime, whether they're making decisions we agree with or disagree with. I think that ought to give us all some level of discomfort. I think you could combine an expansion of the number of justices with an idea that every federal judge is part of a pool, the same way that judges right now are chosen for 3-judge panels, and every case you could simply draw a different panel in a random way. I think that there's lots and lots of things we could do, and that sort of fit the Constitution and the purpose and the goal and the history of the courts, and that if we don't do those things, we're in for a 30 or 40-year period of a real imperial court that will make what Red Map did to our states look like child's play.
Well, and on that note,
I was
We
trying so hard
are,
to be optimistic,
I
and
know it. Well, and I
you
guess
made me leave on that
that's
note.
the thing. That's not the most optimistic way to end. But I am interested. I am interested in. We're going into this. We're going into this big fight at the end of this month or the very beginning of next month. We'll be filing our signatures to be on this year's November's ballot, and so we're incredibly excited. Any kind of final words, suggestions? We need a pep talk, Dave.
I was trying to offer just that before. Don't give up, don't ever give up, right? That's the old Jimmy Valvano line that we hear. Uh, the fight that you are in matters so much. It is the only way forward. The only thing that can fix this is citizens doing the work that you are getting up and doing, uh, knocking on doors so bravely, so purposely, so passionately. This fight is the fight of our moment, and I am honored to be in it with all of you who are doing so much good, hard work every day. It is really, really hard. You are close to a finish line here. They are doing this and making it so hard because they fear the collective power of what happens when citizens come together and demand real democracy. And you all are demanding real democracy. Keep going. We will win. We are with you, all of us who believe in fair maps and genuine democracy are right there with you in this fight, and we thank you for it.
Well, and a big thank you to you. We appreciate your joining us, and go watch the ball game.
I will do just that. Thank you. Good luck to all of you.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mia, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
All righty, I'm gonna remove your spotlight and I'm gonna share my screen again. We appreciate Dave coming on. Sorry, 1 second. And I think we put a link in the chat there where you can pre-order his book about the court. So that's kind of cool. These are his other books. And then moving on. Well, I know that a lot of folks that what you really are interested in is knowing how we're doing and where we're at with signature collection, us with signature collection for citizens, not politicians. So there isn't going to be an announcement of like, oh, we're done, or we got this number or this number until we actually turn the books in, which will be by July 3rd, which is the deadline. So you're not going to find out exact numbers or anything like that. But I will say that the campaign's feeling pretty confident and good. So I don't think anyone needs to like lose sleep at night as to whether or not we'll have enough signatures. We're pretty much wrapping up. There's just a few more signature collection events going on. And we don't have information about the whole campaign, but just for Fair Districts volunteers themselves, only Fair Districts volunteers. We have collected at least, because these numbers are going to grow a little bit, at least 179,965 signatures, which is pretty amazing. We have collected signatures in all 88 counties. In a couple of counties, we've only collected 2 signatures, but we have hit all 88. At least 2,190 different volunteers have circulated petition booklets and turned in those petition booklets with signatures, which is also pretty cool. And just with Fair Districts volunteers alone, 10 counties have met the 5% threshold for the 5% of the vote in the previous gubernatorial election. And one county, the star doing pulling way above their weight, Cuyahoga County is at 12%, 12.75 of the gubernatorial vote. So congratulations to everybody for collecting everywhere. There will be, there's lots of things that are going to be coming up, and all I can say is like, please please pay attention to your emails from fair districts. We're going to be talking to you and reaching out about when there'll be signature turn-in. That'll be really exciting. We're going to have some celebrations around the state to congratulate you and thank you. And we're picking those days right now, and we will let you know as soon as possible. So, all around pats on the back. And it's really inspiring to hear Dave talk from other states to say, folks are with us. I mean, we're trying to save Ohio's democracy, but we're also trying to save democracy in the United States, because with Congress rigged, it's all of a piece. So it's nice to know that folks are out there and pushing with us and supporting us. Now, we wanted to tell you a little bit about these events we held yesterday, where the Chief Justice went to Marietta, Steubenville, Massillon, and Youngstown. And you might say, why did she go there? Why did she go to those 4 places? They're all along the eastern edge of Ohio. Well, because those places, believe it or not, are all in Congressional District 6, and there was a special election yesterday there, and she went there to highlight just how gerrymandered that district is. Some of us went with her or to some of those places, and to just talk a little bit more about Congressional District 6 and why it's kind of the poster child for gerrymandering in Ohio. Elizabeth Warner from League of Women Voters and Colin Marazzi from ACLU are going to give you a little bit more information.
Thank you, Mia. And I want to say to folks who came out yesterday, especially Mia, who spoke in Steubenville, and Debbie in Marietta, and Carol in Massillon, and Kathy in Youngstown. Thank you, and thank you for bringing folks out with you too. That's super, super appreciated. Okay, so District 6 had a big election yesterday, right? So to help educate voters about both the special election yesterday and the impacts of gerrymandering within a specific district, the League partnered with Dr. David Niven, who is a University of Cincinnati professor of political science, to produce a report on the impacts of gerrymandering on this district. So in Ohio's 6th congressional district, strangers in the district, Dr. Niven uses research-grounded storytelling to provide tangible examples of the impacts manipulated district maps have on communities and the people living within them. I think as redistricting advocates, we are always looking for ways to connect why we're all working so hard for reform to why people should care about this. And this report offers creative answers to questions about the real world effects of gerrymandering. I think that Dr. Niven's findings offers a unique narrative that will empower voters and drive meaningful redistricting reform. And Colin is going to talk about some of the standouts around cultural distance in the 6th district. And he wrote a great piece about this too, which I am putting in the chat if Tiffany did not already. Take it away, Colin.
Well, great. Thank you, Elizabeth. And yeah, I really, when I read this report by Dr. Niven, I was just reminded again how thankful we are to have Dr. Niven to be on our side. He is so creative and so persuasive, the way he can articulate just how, in fact, our legislature and our legislative districts are gerrymandered. And I think one of the most important pieces of this report is the focus on cultural gerrymandering within our districts. And I think he did a really fantastic job showcasing the different cultures that exist within the 6th district that ultimately make it a very difficult, if not impossible, district for a single representative to accurately and adequately represent. There's just too many competing interests at play here. This, to start off with, as a little bit of fun, that according to sports websites, I forget the particular one, but Dr. Niven found that the 6th district is actually home to 3 separate professional baseball fan bases, which I think is really illustrative of how this is kind of a mashup, an amalgamation of different people and cultures. if you've been on these calls for any time at all, you probably know I talk about being from Northeast Ohio frequently. I grew up in Portage County, which is 30 minutes away from Youngstown on I-76, and it's 30 minutes away from Canton and Massillon on I-77. And I have in-laws who are from Steubenville and from Weirton, and it is night and day. Really, it really truly is. And the report does a great job talking about, again, the cultural issues, the cultural differences of the district, how the local regional economies within the district actually, are not congruent. They are actually competing. Dr. Niven talks very well about how in the southern tip of the district, the major economic driver is energy production and mining, while in the northern part of the district, it is manufacturing. And those interests oftentimes are directly opposed to one another in terms of creating new energy efficiency versus relying on fossil fuel extraction from natural sources. So he really approaches this report in that kind of a sense. It's really, really a cool way to see yet again another sad fact, which is Ohio is one of the 10 most gerrymandered states in the country, and our legislature likes it that way. And what really got my temperature up as I was reading this report is the realization that, yes, the 6th district is an extreme case, but it is not unique. If you look across the state, if you look at the 5th, the 8th, the 15th congressional districts in the state of Ohio, you see the same thing. Again, I don't want to take up any more time than we need, so we can go to the next slide, and I'll turn it over to Elizabeth.
Thank you. I'm so afraid I'm going to mispronounce this town. So Gnadenhutton, please tell me if that was right. It has 1,211 people in it. It has been split in between 2 districts. This makes 0 sense. Why is this town split between 2 congressional districts? I think you know the answer, but spoiler, because when politicians draw district maps, they are not interested in keeping communities together. They're only interested in their own power. So now Gnadenhutton, please tell me that that is right, is divided into the 6th and 12th districts, which is bonkers. And I want to just shout out a little bit our own social media here. This is helping us tell that story too. And we will share links to the graphics, and you can use these in your own social media. Even though this election was yesterday, this content is actually evergreen, at least until we pass the Citizens Not Politicians Amendment in November. So we'll share those with you tomorrow. And then Colin, did you want to talk about Massillon?
Sure, and this is Dr. Niven does a great job showcasing, kind of the what I would argue is racially motivated gerrymandering, and the dissecting of Massillon's African American population into multiple districts. You can see here the shaded regions are the different districts, with blue being the 13th district, or I'm sorry, blue being the 6th district, and beige being the 13th. And you can see, though Massillon, again, is a relatively smaller city, it's got around 30,000 people in it. It's split directly in half, and it breaks apart that African-American community between a vast majority white district of the 6th versus the much more culturally and ethnically diverse district of the 13th, which includes all of the city of Canton, the city of Akron, and all of Summit County. It really is a great depiction of just kind of the real life consequences of partisan and political gerrymandering. And I would just say that this was another key pillar that Dr. Niven used to showcase, once again, just how absurd our congressional districts are when you use any real objective measure, and again, the real world consequences that it can have.
Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you guys for highlighting that report for us. That's, it's, why am I not surprised that we could write a report about every congressional district like this? But having had that special election, really brings it home. And this kind of image that shows, the purposefulness of something like that. Look at this little guy here. That's so incredible. Anyway, we are just wrapping up here, and as you know, we're coming towards the finish line in terms of the signature collection phase of this campaign. But of course, we aren't going to be done pushing to pass this amendment until 7:30 p.m. on election night. I think I'm going to say that many times. Now, maybe we'll have, we'll have between, let's say, 500,000 and 800,000 people will have signed this petition, but that's not enough in terms of people that have to know about the petition. We want every voter in Ohio to know about this amendment so that when they go into the ballot booth on November 5th, or when they're early voting, or when they're doing their absentee ballot, they know that they're in favor of redistricting reform. So we want to reach out and speak to and connect with every single voter before November. And that's going to take a volunteer army, just as signature collection took a volunteer army. And so we have a sign up here. If you are already on our sign up list, if you've signed up before, if you've collected signatures, you don't need to sign up again. But if signature collection was not your thing and you were kind of waiting for that phase to be over, but you would like to be involved between now and November, go ahead and sign up at this link. Again, we will send these slides to you. We will send a follow-up to you. We will send this recording to you. And that this will give you an opportunity to just say you're interested, and then we'll reach out to tell you some more about the kinds of things that you can do. Of course, one of them is to be involved in the Speakers Bureau. There's going to be a training on July 17th, and you can register for it at that link that Tiffany has popped in the chat, and Elizabeth. But there are other ways that you can be involved in educating Ohioans about this amendment. Tabling at community events, anywhere that you would have collected signatures is a good place to go and hand out literature. We have some literature now. The campaign is going to have some literature coming up soon. So we don't want to miss any of these opportunities, whether it's July 4th or any of the farmers markets or sports games or all those kinds of things, concerts that you were collecting signature at. We can table there. Another thing that's going to be really important is going to be finding local organizations to endorse the amendment. We want to make sure that the endorsements cover the entire political spectrum, and they have big groups and small groups and neighborhood groups and statewide groups and everything. We're going to want to connect with local businesses and make sure that they have some posters in their windows and that they sign on as endorsers. We're going to want to write letters to the editor, share things on social media, make connections on college campuses. All of these kinds of things are going to be really important. We may, plan some educational events. So the sign up right now doesn't ask you to commit to any of these particular things. It just says, I'm interested. I want to be involved. Hit me up. And then we'll send you something a little bit more detailed. We also want to know, one of the questions that it does ask is if you're interested in being a leader in your community for any of these activities. We've had incredible, wonderful local leaders during signature collection, and we hope that many of them or all of them will continue to be local leaders, but some may want to be involved, let's say, with organizing speaking events, and some may want to work finding endorsements, and some may want to encourage people to write letters to the editor. So if you fill out this form, which we hope that you will, and you're interested in doing some organizing in your local area, please give us a little heads up as to kind of what areas you're interested in leading on, whether you want to lead in the Speakers Bureau, or you want to lead in endorsements, or you want to lead when it comes to tabling at community events, that kind of thing. So the more information you can give us about that, the easier it is for us. So that's really it. I always have a last page, which just has some info on how to request a speaker, our toolkit, when the next huddle is, how to follow us on social media. And of course, we will send all of this to you. But that is about it, folks. I see a couple of questions in the chat. So I think, if you are interested in let's see, knowing the powers will be cancel signatures, we certainly have enough to get it on the ballot in November. Yeah, Ted, the campaign is being very careful, and of course, there is a little bit of signature collection still going on. And looks like Catherine is typing you an answer, so I will just leave it at that. But I think you can sleep easy. And of course, that there's always a cure period. If it turns out that we need more signatures, we will have an opportunity to get more signatures. So that's about all I have to say. Elizabeth, Colin, Catherine, Trevor, Tiffany, anything else we want to add before we say good evening to everyone?
I just want to answer Kenneth's question. Yes, always. We're always working to register voters and educate voters and provide all the support that voters need, regardless of what election is going on. So absolutely, we'll be doing that. And just a million thank yous.
Yes. And Tommy asks if we'll be doing postcards. I'm guessing that lots of different organizations will be sending out postcards. Just stay in touch. You know where to find out the good information. Fair Districts will be sending you information. There will always be opportunities to take action. Michael Barron, I sent a big old parcel of flyers up to you today. So there'll be flyers available all around the state. And again, sign on if you haven't yet. We want to work with you, and we appreciate everything that you do. And that's it. Have a great evening, everyone.